Good afternoon, it's Debbie Evans and Rolo here. Good afternoon to all Jack Russell's children and adults who might be listening. We're leaving Greek mythology for now and we're going to the United Arab Emirates. This is a bit further than Rolo usually goes on his adventures, but we're time travelling to the year 1971 and Rolo has an important role to play. This is from the fourth book, The Secret Adventures of Rolo, Jewel Dog and the Dragons. On my way through the time tunnel and not really knowing what to expect on this adventure, I asked Yulia if she knew anything of the history of the area. Archaeology has revealed that this desert region shows signs of habitation going back to at least 3000 BC, the woodland girl told me as she held up her lantern to light the way. But the United Arab Emirates, or UAE as it's known today, has only existed a short time, less than 50 years. Prior to that, it was desert, populated by Bedouin tribes, nomads who divided their time between the ocean for fishing and pearl diving, the desert for rearing camels and herds, and the oasis for cultivating dates and growing vegetables. What does Bedouin mean? I asked. Desert dweller. They were resourceful and independent tribesmen, famed for their traditions of offering hospitality to guests. Goody, sounds like there'll be food. I didn't know much about the history of the UAE, except I'd heard the floppy-haired boy saying that its sudden wealth came from the discovery of oil in the 1950s. Athelstan said that it was a timely discovery because the region was having a hard time after the loss of revenue from pearl diving due to the invention of the Japanese cultured pearl. When oil was discovered, no one knew at first how much there would be or how long oil revenue might last, and so oil exportation only began in the early 1960s, Yulia continued, and that turned Abu Dhabi from being one of the poorest sheikdoms into the richest. Who was the ruler? I asked. Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan became ruler of Dubai in 1966. He had the foresight to reinvest money from oil sales, so the industry began to flourish and the wealth of the Trucial states grew, with the Sheikhdom of Dubai, under the Maktoum family, expanding its reputation of being the region's leading trading post. Golly, Yulia knew her Middle East history. I came out from the time tunnel in a warm, dry and sandy place. It was already dusk, but the sand retained warmth from the heat of the sun. All I could see around me was desert. The temperature reminded me of my visit to ancient Egypt in the time of the pharaohs. Yulia waved me off and told me to drink plenty of water in this climate. I could feel the temperature creep down as night rolled its inky blanket over the vast sky. I looked up and noticed at once how starry it was, and then cocked my ear as I heard a sound and instinctively lay low. 2 fleet-footed dogs ran past me and then came back for a sniff and a look. "Salam alaikum," said one. The other bowed in my direction. "Hello, I'm Rolo," I replied, hoping they could understand me. They looked a bit like greyhounds, sleek and noble. They seemed amused by my appearance. "Our master will like to meet you. He likes little dogs and needs some distraction. Come with us," in heavily accented English, and with that they ran full pelt across the dunes, and I had no choice but to follow, struggling to keep up, my little legs going 19 to the dozen. I followed the long-legged dogs who were chatting away with ease whilst they ran, telling me about their breed called Saluki, a kind of greyhound formerly used for hunting and now the preferred breed of Arab sheikhs. We approached a simply dressed man sitting cross-legged in the sand. His head was covered with a cloth and he wore a loose white gown and sandals. Close by stood a fine white Arabian horse with its reins hanging loose, and on a post was a falcon, hooded and tethered by a jess round its foot. Just going to show you the picture here. The horse whickered softly as the dogs approached, and the man looked up. He had a kindly face and dark brown eyes. This was the ruler of Abu Dhabi. Salam alaikum, he greeted me with the same pleasant-sounding words that the Salukis had used. Noor, Rayyan, who is this little fellow? I bowed deeply and told him my name. He held out his hand, inviting me to approach, so I snuggled beside him on the sand near a small fire. The man smelt nice, sort of perfumed. He ruffled my ears, and together we enjoyed the peace and solitude of the desert sky at night. The Salukis stretched out at his feet. Luckily, he spoke in perfect English. My forefathers used the stars to guide them through life, whether it be across the desert by camel, to navigate at sea, to help whilst fishing, or even to tell when the weather was going to change. With all the modern technology of the 20th century, we still use the stars, and I find comfort and peace in the desert at night, away from artificial light, he mused, continuing to stroke my ears. Tomorrow is a monumental day, but I cannot sleep. I've come out here to be at peace and to think. I'm going to meet with my brothers from the Banyas Tribal Confederation, and we are going to formalise the treaty of the United Arab Emirates, and they have chosen me to be first president. He sighed heavily with the responsibility and looked at me. It's a great honour, and all have put their trust in me to unite our brothers. The fire crackled in approval. Our original plan had been to join with Bahrain and Kuwait and our 7 sheikdoms in accordance with the treaty of the 1820s, brokered by the British to keep this area of the Gulf at peace. But Bahrain and Kuwait have since been granted independence of their own. However, even without them, we will prove stronger together. You're a British dog, are you not? They are very shrewd people. They want to keep friendly with us so as to keep their trade links with India secure. The British have spent a lot of time and naval power keeping away other Europeans over the years, he laughed. They announced their intention to withdraw from the region 3 years ago, and finally we will rule ourselves. Tomorrow, 2nd of December, is the appointed date. Have you come to witness the signing? I nodded and snuggled in closer. I suppose I had, although not in an official capacity. The ruling sheikhs of Dubai, Sharjah, Ajman, Al Quwain and Fujairah are all coming to sign this treaty at the guest palace in Dubai, right on the seashore. Wait, you've forgotten one. What about Ras Al Khaimah? I asked, eager to show off my knowledge of the UAE, learnt from the floppy-haired boy. No, they are not coming. We're still in negotiation with them. Sheikh Zayed stroked his beard thoughtfully. I have such big plans for this region, he said, and his eyes lit up in the firelight as he talked to me of his dreams of expansion. Now all you see are fishing huts, barasti made from palm fronds, and a few low-rise buildings. He took a stick and started drawing pictures in the sand. We're going to extend the creek by dredging it and by building a fine port here. This will become one of the biggest ports in the world. There will also be a dry dock for shipbuilding and repairs. Dhows built in the traditional way by hand with riveted wooden pegs will continue to ply their trade across the Persian Gulf to Iran, Pakistan and India, and further around the Arabian Sea to Africa. The creek and port will play a very important part in the development of Dubai as a leading trade hub. Workers will come from all over, new airports in each emirate, our own airline. We will be the envy of the world, mark you my words. No wonder he's remembered as being a man of great vision. A glow on the horizon in the east made us realise dawn was fast approaching. Sheikh Zayed unrolled a prayer mat and faced east, making salams and repeating phrases. I waited respectfully some distance away. When he had finished, he kicked sand over the dying embers of his campfire, rolled up his prayer mat and tied it behind the saddle, brushed the sand off his clothes, took up the falcon on his arm, mounted his horse, whistling his Salukis to follow. Yalla, we must go. Come and see history being made, he shouted back to me, and without waiting for my reply, spurred his horse into a gallop. I ran with the Salukis across the dunes, our paws leaving straight tracks behind us. Luckily, we didn't have too far to travel. We approached a simple marble building surrounded by big whitewashed walls and waited in the courtyard while Sheikh Zayed was ushered inside to freshen up and change his kandora for the big ceremony. His horse and falcon were led away. I remembered Yulia's words and drank thirstily from a stone water trough. The Salukis disappeared, and I flopped out in the shade to watch the dignitaries arrive. Although it was early December and technically winter, the sun was warming things up nicely, and I enjoyed the sensation of lying on warm marble steps. After a doze, I peered through an open French door, past the long velvet curtain, and counted 21 people in the interestingly shaped round room, which was dominated by a large circular wooden table with inlaid leather panels. So this was where the signing was to take place. A large chandelier was suspended from the ceiling in the centre of the domed room. The crystal pendants caught the light from the December sun, and as they twinkled, they reminded me of the starry Arabian sky I'd seen the previous night. On the table lay many documents, pens and glasses of water. This was not the time to jump on the table and change the declaration, like I'd attempted with Magna Carta in England some 800 years previously. I overheard an Englishman called Sir Geoffrey Arthur being introduced. He was there to sign on behalf of Her Britannic Majesty's government, and he stood out because he was the only dignitary in a Western suit. The others wore what I assumed to be traditional Arab robes, with their heads covered with white or red and white checked cloths. Everyone ignored me, even my new friend from last night. To be fair, I think he was a bit busy. After the signing of the declaration, everyone left the room and assembled outside. There were photographers and reporters from all around the world. I thought it best if I kept out of sight. I'd travelled almost 50 years back in time to witness this historic event. I wasn't supposed to be there, so I didn't want to be photographed or appear on the BBC 6 o'clock news. I was just thinking it was time to return to my own era when everyone's attention was drawn to an empty flagpole. The new red, white, green and black flag, which symbolised Arab unity, was about to be hoisted for the very first time. I had a running commentary from Rayan, who had appeared by my side. I asked him questions about the traditional clothing, and he explained that the white robe was called a kandora and the headscarf was called a gutra, held in place with a rope called an igal, which could be used in an emergency to hobble a straying camel. The Saluki seemed to enjoy the limelight and wandered off to his master's side to be included in the historic photographs. A 21-gun salute was fired to signal the founding of the United Arab Emirates, and the new flag was raised. I don't know what happened after that, as I took off as fast as I could. As soon as the first shot was fired, you probably recall I don't like loud noises. It was just as well I remembered the way out from the palace, though I wondered how I would ever find my way across the desert to the time tunnel entrance. Luckily, I managed to retrace our footprints, as there had been no shamal or desert wind blowing sand to cover them. Yulia's lantern shone out like a welcome beacon. What an exciting adventure! I'd witnessed the founding of the United Arab Emirates. I'm only sorry that I didn't get to meet Leo, but I was about 35 years too early for him. I sincerely wished I could tell the floppy-haired boy about my adventure in the land of his birth, but he wouldn't have believed me, even if I could have done. I suddenly felt homesick and tired and couldn't wait to get back to my basket. "Paddy paws, you're all covered in sand," exclaimed Yulia. "Yalla," I practiced my new word. Let's go. So that's the end of today's chapter from the 4th book in the series. Thank you so much for listening to us, and Rolo and I will be back tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 with another exciting chapter. I'm not sure yet which book we'll be delving into, but we're very much enjoying National Storytelling Week. Thank you very much. Goodbye.